day 1096 of the Trump administration. 288 days to go now until the 2020 presidential election. And the next presidential inauguration day will be 1 year from today. Donald Trump's impeachment trial gets underway just over 12 hours from now. He's now on his way to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. He will land less than 12 hours before the Senate is gavelled into session, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Tonight, the battle over how the case will proceed is heating up. With just hours to go, Mitch McConnell, the leader in the Senate, has released the ground rules, and it's clear he is ready to move swiftly while putting off consideration of witnesses until after opening arguments. Tomorrow he's going to introduce those rules. There will likely be up to 2 hours of debate. Democrats will introduce amendments, which will likely lead to more debate before a vote. Then on Wednesday, 1 p.m., House managers and Trump defense lawyers make their arguments. They each get 24 hours over 2 days to do that, which could make for some very long days. That's part of McConnell's intention. After that's done, senators get 16 hours to present questions in writing. Then they'll consider and vote on witnesses and documents. Unlike the Clinton impeachment proceedings, none of the evidence from the House will immediately come over to the Senate chamber as part of the Senate case. It will all have to be subject to a vote. More on that in a bit. You may recall McConnell was pretty clear about his agenda with regard to the impeachment case.
Everything I do during this, I'm coordinating with White House counsel. There will be no difference between the president's position and our position. There's no chance the president's going to be removed from office.
So that's coordination. Tonight, Democratic Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who's been pressing 4 witnesses, slammed McConnell's decisions.
It is now certain that Leader McConnell is going along with President Trump's cover-up, hook, line, and sinker. When you look at his resolution, it's no wonder he delayed it till the last minute. He didn't want people to study it or know about it. It's clear McConnell is hell-bent on making it much more difficult to get witnesses and documents, and intent on rushing the trial through. Tomorrow, before the resolution is adopted, we will be able to introduce amendments, and we will introduce a whole series of amendments for witnesses, for documents, and other ways to straighten out what McConnell has done and make it a real trial.
Schumer at a small wobbly podium outside Penn Station. Friday, we learned who would be defending Trump during the impeachment trial. A number of them have been Fox News regulars and are loyal supporters of the president. Tonight, the White House announced a group of Republicans from the House who will get Trump's defense message out, not on the Senate floor, but largely in the media. This afternoon, Trump's attorneys and the Democratic House managers had walkthroughs of the Senate as part of their preparation. Trump's lawyers also released a legal brief refuting the articles of impeachment, calling on the Senate to immediately acquit him. Over the weekend, House managers submitted their brief outlining the case against Trump and what they say is overwhelming evidence that he used his official power to pressure Ukraine to interfere in our upcoming 2020 election. It's worth noting that has unfolded since the House voted to impeach 1 month ago. We've seen new evidence, of course, from Rudy Giuliani associate Lev Parnas, who last week here told Rachel Maddow that Trump knew what he was doing in Ukraine. Among that evidence, texts suggesting a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine was under surveillance. A government watchdog agency found Trump broke the law by blocking aid to Ukraine. Emails revealed discussions between the Office of Management and Budget and the Pentagon about holding off that aid that had been approved by Congress. And former National Security Advisor John Bolton said he was willing to testify in the Senate trial if subpoenaed. So it's been a busy month. Tonight, Rudy Giuliani is once again speaking out about the impeachment trial and his former pal and constant companion, Lev Parnas. He says Parnas lied when he spoke to Rachel about their work for Trump in Ukraine.
In very large part, did not tell the truth. The man is a demonstrated liar.
Yeah.
His motivation is not to go to prison.
So let's move on to the other allegation, which was that you directed the surveillance of a sitting U.S. ambassador, Marie Yovanovitch,
No, I did
in
not.
Ukraine.
No, I can definitely tell you I didn't. In fact, she directed the surveillance of me.
No one is investigating that last bit because there is no evidence to support it. However, the Ukrainian government is investigating the alleged surveillance of the ambassador by Rudy Giuliani's associates.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.